Hello. Thank you for watching. I watched a Kent Hovind debate, and I'm eager to talk about it. This one was between a man named Jim Majors and Kent Hovind. Standing for Truth and Nephilim Free were the hosts and or moderators of the debate. Jim Majors went first, and he claimed that scholars say that Genesis was written later than the date that Kent would claim, around 400 BC. He quoted a Babylonian creation epic. He said it was, the text was from the 7th century, but the origin of the story was from the 18th century. I think he said 18th, not 8th. This, of course, is the epic about Marmaduke. Marduk, not Marmaduke. No, he wasn't talking about a fictional Great Dane. Marduk. And I don't see the connection. That seems like a weak argument for me about whether biblical creation happened, to quote some other creation story. Kent Hovind claimed victory by default when he had his opening statement because Jim Majors only talked about the Babylonian creation epic and not the creation described in the Bible. Kent Hovind went through a list of 15 different kinds of evidence. That was an interesting list to see. And there are different kinds of evidence, different categories. You can be more specific if you're saying somebody gave evidence or didn't give evidence. Jim Majors claimed that science says dogs will always produce dogs and cows produce cows. Science doesn't say everything has a common ancestor. Wow. I don't know if this guy is stupid or dishonest or how hard he is trying to get science textbooks to stop saying that everything has a common ancestor, and at some point in the past a single-cell organism became everything, which is what science doesn't claim anything. A bunch of people who are scientists claim it. And so that was a ridiculous claim on Jim Majors' part. Bronze Age mythology. He was denouncing Bronze Age mythology, calling the Bible epic Bronze Age mythology, the Bible creation account. And, oh my eye. Let's see. Then he denounced Kent Hovind's use of the word kind as unscientific or something like that. But kind is the way the Hebrew word baramin was translated into English in the older translations of the Bible, which are better than the newer translations. Kent Hovind got his turn to speak. He claimed Moses did not copy the Babylonian creation epic. Of course he didn't. There are too many differences for an honest person to say it's a copy. But Kent Hovind's claim is that Moses got it right. The Babylonian epic, it got it wrong. They're both creation epics, so there are going to be similarities between them. Duh. Kind of like, yeah, I learned recently there's a legal principle. Because the creators of one of the Star Trek TV series that's being made recently is suing a video game maker because they claim that the video game maker copied them exactly. And the video game maker's claim is he's just using this one principle that there are certain things that just need to be in a certain kind of story. What was it? Fait accompli? It sounds like a French term, the legal term. And his claim is you need this kind of thing in a science fiction space travel story, and so Star Trek doesn't get to claim doesn't get to claim having that kind of concept as their intellectual property. So, of course, a creation account, a creation epic, is going to have some similarities. There's going to be some crossover, or some overlap is a better word, overlap between different creation stories. Kent said that the kinds have limits. It is scientific to say kind because there are limits which have never in 6,000 years of world history been witnessed to be violated. Kent pointed out that our current modern classification system, created by Carl Linnaeus, which now is being debated or reworked, is not the biblical classification system. God doesn't owe it to us to copy a future classification system when he's revealing the Bible to Moses. And that was a great point on Kent's part. So, where do the kinds line up with, is it species, genus, genera, family, order? Well, it doesn't have to match any one of those things because God created his classification system about 3,000 years ago, maybe older than that. And yeah, so we don't need, he doesn't owe it to make it match up with what we're using now. Kent went through some examples of possible biblical kinds, like maybe all the bears have one common ancestor. And then they went on to the discussion section of the debate. Jim accused kind of being a vague term and demanded a working taxonomy from Kent Hovind. Kent said he does not know how many cats and birds were originally created. But they are still cats and birds now, so they're still the same kind. Kent Hovind claimed that the burden of proof is not on him, and Kent's right about this. The person who is not claiming a scientific fact or something to be scientific, does not have the burden of proof. And Kent Hovind pointed out one other reason. If you're demanding what you believe to be put into a science textbook in public schools, you have a very heavy burden of proof to show that it's scientific and it's not just a belief. Jim Morrison claimed that all life is not related, and it's a gross misrepresentation to say that single-cell organism is the origin of all living things according to the belief of evolutionism. Kent Hovind proved that he's not grossly misrepresenting anything by having a phylogenetic tree, the tree of life, copied from various textbooks. Jim Majors tried to get Kent to agree that all birds have a common ancestor because they look so much alike. And Kent said no, he's not going to say all birds have a common ancestor. There are some differences between the birds that make that claim not a legitimate claim. Jim Majors claimed that the bones. Why would God make different kinds of animals look alike? Yeah, he said something like that. Yeah, the different kinds look so much alike, though. Kent Hovind made a car analogy. Different cars that look very similar. That means that's the way they were made by the designer. So birds that are similar could just be that way because that's the way they were made. For example, there might be some cars that one model of a car has submodels, or one, model of a car would have sub-classifications, and they might build it on the same frame and use the same motor for the two-door and the four-door and the hatchback. But that would not in any way disprove that there's a designer making them or prove that the two-door car gave birth to the four-door car. Jim Majors asked the question something like, what if an intelligent designer designed the first thing so that it could evolve into all these things? And claimed there are transition fossils. I'm skeptical on that one. What transition fossil? Kent said no, it doesn't make that that God would not design things to evolve. And there is no evidence of things changing into a different kind of animal. He gave the example, the discussion touched on exoskeletons. There's a big difference between exoskeletons and internal skeletons. And there has never been a exoskeleton witnessed in the process of developing, which would be useful proof, a scientific proof, as if somebody's seen something. Jim Majors said stars are not seen forming, but we can see the stages. So Jim is saying we look out with our powerful, not microscope, microscope sort of small stuff, but oh, not macroscope. Why am I just having a brain freeze on the word? The thing we look at the stars with. Telescope. With our powerful telescopes, we can see this star is beginning, this star is this stage in forming, this star is further along in the stages of forming. And he claims that, like, the exoskeletons are like that. We can see the different animals and see the different stages of forming. Kent Hovind pointed out that that's based on a religious belief about these things forming. If you see what you think are the different stages, but you've never seen it go all the way through, you're definitely using some religious belief. Jim Majors claimed it. He's not using religious belief. It's not religious belief. Yes, if it's not been witnessed, then you're using religious belief. Kent Hovind made a wheel analogy. Being able to arrange things in different orders doesn't prove about them evolving from one thing to the other, because there are one-wheeled vehicles, there are two-wheeled vehicles, there are three-wheeled vehicles, there are four-wheeled vehicles. And Kent Hovind could line them all up. You and I could line them all up, put pictures of them and say, see, this one evolved into this one, evolved into this one, evolved into this one. But, no, actually there's a designer that designed the one-wheeled vehicle, the two-wheeled vehicle, the three-wheeled vehicle, the four-wheeled vehicle. Let's see. Jim Majors claimed that kind is not a scientific term. There's no evidence to back it up. Kent Hovind said there is evidence. The evidence is that we have never seen the big changes that are claimed to have been happened by the religion of evolutionism. If anybody has seen them, that would nudge it away from a religious belief to scientific or quasi-scientific if it's not widely seen, or possibly scientific if it's not widely seen but somebody's seen it. But right now we've got 0 people that have seen something become a completely different kind of animal. 0. Kent Hovind pointed out that the evolutionists believe things that happened in the past aren't happening now. But we should see it still happening now. If it really happened, and it happened because of natural processes and not some god in the past doing it. Jim Morrison thought he had a real winning argument. Says anyone why we can't be so confident that God turned mud into man? Kent talked about how cars are made of natural components from the ground. So it's a stupid argument to say, well, you believe that man came from dust. But there's a designer that makes the cars. So being made from the dirt is what everything is made from, Cars are made from materials they get from the ground, they smelt them and then form them into the cars. Jim Majors claimed that that's a logical fallacy to compare cars and life because cars don't reproduce. Well, he's right that there's a difference, but he's wrong about it being a fallacy. Something that can reproduce is even more complicated. And more complicated means more impossible that it could be from random chance. Complicated things, millions of parts working together right, can't be claimed to be from random chance, honestly. And you could believe what you want, but to call it scientific and probable that random chance fits, all these precise chemicals together that don't naturally come together. Jim used a claim, I don't believe evolution, I accept it. Using that wording as a way to try to accuse those who don't believe it of, being delusional and detached from reality. It's there, you have to accept it. There's no way you could not believe it, it's there. He accused Kent of taking a book literally, but being metaphorical about it when it needs to fill in gaps. No, Kent doesn't do that. And Kent, said no to that accusation. And he pointed out Jim Majors is the one who has gaps that need to be filled and more holes in his story. Jim Major made the ridiculous, stupid claim that evolution is how we have technological advancements, including medical advancements. No. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria are still bacteria. They did not turn into a worm or a mouse or an insect. And so, no, that's got nothing to do with them turning into an insect. The fact that we need to try a different antibiotic medicine to kill something that's become resistant to one other antibiotic medicine. Kent Hovind pointed out that the lack of popularity of the truth about creation is not proof of, is not good evidence for evolutionism, because people get punished if they don't toe the line. They get sent to academic Siberia. And, he made an analogy with communism. In the old days, communists got sent to Siberia. Russia's not communist now, but they get sent to North Korea's version of Siberia. If in North Korea they do not say that communism is a good thing and the best thing. So you can't say, well, people are saying it, nobody is against it. In North Korea, nobody is against communism. Doesn't prove it. Jim Major said, well, there is, you could find some people to secretly tell you, in North Korea that communism sucks. Yeah, but they won't publicly do it, and we're talking about, his claim was, since nobody's publicly, or he's claiming that it's such a small number of people publicly questioning evolution, that proves it. He claimed he needs to fight the true creation story because there's a separation between church and state and religion shouldn't be in the schools or something like that. Okay, separation of church and state is to protect churches from being bossed around by the government, not the other way. So he's misstating that, and separation of church and state is not the exact wording in the Constitution. But Jim Majors is the one who is forcing his religious belief to be taught in public school science classrooms. Kent Hovind made a point that you can't disprove that a woman was made from man's rib. You don't have to believe it, but you can't disprove it. How would you disprove that? And he made the point there is no evidence that a non-dog ever became a dog. We've always had dogs, reproduce dogs, and no difference from that. Jim accused Kent of denying genetics, or asked me he was denying genetics, and Kent Hovind pointed out Chevy and Ford both use steel in their cars. Does that prove they're related, or that's just the material the designer used? Similarity in genetics could be designed that way, built in by the creator, and is not proof of evolution. He repeated the thing about cars don't reproduce. Jim asked the question, where do you believe man and animals came from? And Kent Hovind's got some good points here. And Kent Hovind's point on this point was that you don't need to know all the details about who, why, or how something was made to identify that there was a designer or a maker of something. He gave the example, if you walk into a ghost town, there are still a few out there, or maybe less than there used to be, but suppose you find an abandoned city that has not been abandoned so long that things have fallen down. You can look at it and know, wow, that is not a natural formation. That was a building put together by people. Wood does not naturally, trees don't grow into the shape of a board of wood and then, come together. There had to have been somebody putting this thing together. You would know that the ghost town was made, even if you don't know the name of the building, of the one that built the building, or what they used the building for. And Kent Hovind made the point, who did the designing and building of something is a completely different argument from, is it design? That's true. If there's a car out in front of this vast studio, and the logos for the manufacturer have all fallen off or been sanded off, so you can't look at it and say, that's the Ford logo, that's the Toyota logo, that's the Nissan, Tesla, or whatever logo, you still could explain that it could not be there because of natural processes, and there is a designer or creator without knowing which company it was. Okay, then Jim Majors used the bad design argument, which is a ridiculous argument. But if there is a creator, then why do humans see such a small amount of light waves? There's shrimp that see like more light waves than us. So, you wouldn't have built it that way. You don't understand why a designer designed it that way. That's not proof that it wasn't built. Kent talked about his ghost town analogy again. He said, maybe there is a reason that we only have the certain light wavelength processing parts of our eyes. Maybe it is because we'll see more later, because maybe it's because of the fall, because there was a fall, and maybe that's what it was. Kent said maybe we did see before the fall. Maybe God's going to surprise us and our resurrected bodies will have that ability. Then they made their closing statements. Jim Morrison claimed there's no evidence for biblical creation. Disingenuous. Claimed Kent is disingenuous. Claim there's something wrong with God creating stars that we can't see. Wow. Okay, that was a bad argument because that's... you don't know why he made them. Just not knowing why something's made doesn't disprove that it was made. But that was a good argument to attack Kent's false belief that this Earth is the only Earth with people on it, the only planet God populated. But there's absolutely no biblical reason. Nowhere in the Bible does it say this is the only planet God made, or that God put people on. So there's probably somebody on a different planet, many hundreds of millions of light years away, that can see those stars. Light cancer, yeah. So he accused God of being bad or of not creating it because the sun that gives us light gives us skin cancer, and there are poisonous plants and children that die young. Okay, that doesn't prove anything. That just proves you wouldn't have done it the way God did it. Maybe there are some reasons. I do have some answers to those ones, but I'm just doing a review of this debate, so I won't spend a long time talking about that. False dichotomy. Yeah. He claimed it's a false dichotomy to denounce false creation accounts. No, it isn't. Okay, then Kent Hovind thanked Jim for doing the debate with him, and he deserves that. Thank you, Jim Majors, even though you're wrong about this, for actually debating Kent Hovind, since there are some people who won't debate Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind reiterated his answers to why the possible reasons why we don't see all the wavelengths of light that the mantis shrimp sees. Reiterated his example about something is created if just could not be explained by natural processes. You don't need to know all the details about who, how, or why. He gave the arrowhead example. Rocks are not going to, by natural forces become the shape of an arrowhead. Unlikely. Although that is far more likely or possible than life and a ghost town. That's even less likely than an arrowhead. If you, drive into a ghost town, walk into a ghost town, you can be certain it was created and it was not the result of random chance processes and natural processes. Alright, thank you for watching. You have a good day.